What if your murder defense was simply, "I ate junk food"? Or that you were too rich to understand basic right and wrong? Juries have heard excuses blaming sleepwalking, video games, even pet monkeys. Some of these defenses worked, others crashed in flames instantly. Tonight, we're diving into 39 real excuses people tried in courtrooms. From the Twinkie defense to "not my pants," every case feels stranger than fiction. We'll walk through the crimes, the lawyer's logic, and each verdict. By the end, you'll never hear "my dog did it" the same way again. Let's open the case file on the wildest defenses judges ever heard. Dan White's Twinkie defense blamed depression marked by junk food. Verdict first. A double killer walked away from murder convictions. In San Francisco, Dan White killed Harvey Milk and George Moscone. His lawyers said depression clouded judgment, not cold political hatred. They pointed to his junk food binge as proof of despair. Reporters mocked it as the infamous Twinkie defense gone wild. Jurors accepted diminished capacity, cutting murder charges down to manslaughter. Many San Franciscans saw the sentence as shockingly light and unfair. Protests erupted at City Hall, candles burning for the dead. Ever since, Twinkies symbolize outrageous courtroom spin rather than innocent snacks. Affluenza teen argued wealth kept him from knowing right and wrong. 4 people died on a Texas roadside, and a teenager survived. 16-year-old Ethan Couch had plowed his pickup into them drunk. His defense psychologist said extreme privilege left him morally undeveloped. The catchy label became affluenza, like a disease of too much money. Instead of prison time, the judge handed down probation and treatment. Families of the victims watched, stunned that wealth seemingly softened justice. Outrage exploded nationwide, turning affluenza teen into a cultural shorthand. When video later showed him partying, he fled probation to Mexico. The case still haunts debates about privilege, accountability, and equal punishment. Emergency surgeons reattached John Wayne Bobbitt's severed penis in Virginia. His wife Lorena had driven away with it after years of abuse. Her lawyers argued irresistible impulse, saying trauma snapped her self-control suddenly. Prosecutors insisted she knew exactly what she was doing that night. Jurors ultimately found her not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. Instead of prison, she spent weeks in a state mental hospital. The trial became tabloid spectacle, overshadowing discussions about domestic violence survivors. Today, Lorena Gallo speaks publicly about abuse, while her case remains infamous. Devil made me do it. Demonic possession murder defense. A Connecticut jury heard a murder story wrapped in exorcism claims. In 1981, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson stabbed his landlord during a confrontation. His defense argued he was demonically possessed after helping a haunted boy. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren backed the possession story publicly. The judge shut that down, refusing to let demons stand as evidence. Jurors instead weighed ordinary motives, like anger and alcohol, not supernatural control. Johnson was convicted of manslaughter, serving only a few years in prison. The "devil made me do it" line still echoes in pop culture. His case shows just how far defenses will reach beyond reality. The Matrix killer, who claimed reality was a computer simulation. When police arrived, a landlord lay dead and a tenant babbled. In Ohio, Tonda Lynn Ansley shot her landlady outside an apartment building. She told investigators the world was like the Matrix, not real. Ansley insisted people around her were programmed agents out to control her. Her lawyers argued paranoid schizophrenia, not movie fandom, drove the shooting. Mental health experts agreed she couldn't separate delusion from reality anymore. The judge ruled her not guilty by insanity, sending her to treatment. Headlines quickly labeled her the Matrix Killer, overshadowing nuanced psychiatric details. The case became cautionary shorthand for blaming crimes on pop culture. Killer sleepwalker drove miles and attacked in-laws while asleep. Imagine driving across town, killing someone, and never waking up. That's what Canadian factory worker Kenneth Parks claimed after a brutal night. He left his Toronto area home, drove to his in-laws' house. Bleeding himself, Parks then walked into a police station and confessed calmly. Sleep experts testified he suffered from a rare disorder causing violent automatism. The jury believed he was sleepwalking, not consciously choosing to attack. Parks was acquitted, even though no one doubted he caused the death. His case sparked fierce debate about responsibility when your brain goes offline. Jenny Jones' gay panic defense downgraded talk show murder charge. A daytime talk show crush reveal ended with a guest dead. In 1995, the Jenny Jones Show surprised Jonathan Schmitz on air. Producers told him a secret admirer was female. It was Scott Amador. Days later in Michigan, Schmitz bought a shotgun and confronted Amador. He shot him dead, then calmly called 911 to confess. At trial, his lawyers leaned on humiliation and so-called gay panic. Jurors rejected premeditated murder, convicting him of second degree instead. The show faced a civil suit accusing it of reckless ambush tactics. The case pushed networks to rethink how far surprise TV could go. Trans panic murder defense claimed shock at victims' gender identity. A California teenager named Gwen Araujo went to a house party. She was a transgender girl living in Newark, east of San Francisco. When some men learned she was trans, the mood turned violently hateful. In court, defense teams argued trans panic, claiming sudden shock diminished responsibility. Prosecutors pointed to hours of assault, showing planning rather than momentary surprise. Juries eventually convicted several men of murder, though not always first degree. California later restricted panic defenses based on gender identity or sexual orientation. Gwen's story became a rallying point for trans rights and hate crime reforms. Bikini model's bust too big to fit through door defense. Police said a thief had squeezed through a tiny doorway opening. When they charged a bikini model, her lawyers mocked that idea. In court, they argued her chest simply couldn't fit through there. Reporters obsessed over tape measure arguments instead of the actual break-in. Jurors were shown photos, diagrams, and comparisons of the narrow entry. The defense tried turning embarrassment into reasonable doubt about basic logistics. Prosecutors countered that burglars can twist, contort, and remove clothing if necessary. The case became late-night joke material more than serious legal precedent. It showed how bodies, not alibis, sometimes dominate strange defense strategies. Oral sex car crash defense said she couldn't have been driving. After a highway crash, one passenger insisted she hadn't touched the wheel. Police reconstruction put her in the driver's seat at impact. If that were true, she argued, someone else must have been steering. Prosecutors said physical evidence still lined up with her driving. Jurors had to weigh awkward intimacy testimony against skid marks and science. The story raced around tabloids, overshadowing the serious injuries involved. It's a classic example of defenses arguing, if that's true, I'm innocent. Identical twin drug trafficking case collapsed because court couldn't tell brothers apart. Police had DNA, fingerprints, and a stash of illegal drugs seized. The problem was, both suspects were identical twins living together nearby. Lab tests showed one twin handled the contraband, but not which one. In court, prosecutors essentially argued they knew one brother was guilty. Defense lawyers replied that guessing between siblings isn't proof beyond reasonable doubt. Judges worried convicting either man risked punishing the wrong genetic copy. With no honest way to separate them, the case simply collapsed. Both men walked free, though suspicion still hung over the whole family. The saga showed how modern forensics can fail when nature duplicates everything. Starbucks coffee and steroid rage defense in wife's killing. In one Virginia case, a husband admitted shooting his wife at home. His lawyers blamed a cocktail of bodybuilding steroids and constant Starbucks coffee. They argued stimulants and hormones together pushed him into uncontrollable, irrational rage. Friends testified he had become jumpy, paranoid, and sleepless on the substances. Prosecutors answered that plenty of coffee drinkers and gym rats never kill. They focused on marital problems and a gun he'd flashed before. The jury didn't fully buy the story, but heard it as mitigation. He was convicted, yet the bizarre defense line grabbed most headlines afterward. Ever since, that case gets cited whenever caffeine meets courtroom drama. Caffeine insanity defense blamed energy drinks for wife's strangling. Another husband claimed a legal drug, not hatred, drove him overboard. He'd been chugging huge amounts of coffee, soda, and energy drinks. Doctors for the defense testified about caffeine intoxication causing paranoia and psychosis. Prosecutors countered that millions over-caffeinate without killing the people they love. The jury heard competing experts, dueling timelines, and arguments over milligrams consumed. In the end, they decided caffeine lowered control but didn't erase responsibility. He still went to prison, just with a slightly lighter sentence. The case showed everyday chemicals can become courtroom villains when tragedy hits. Chewbacca defense became shorthand for confusing juries with nonsense. This one started as a joke on an animated comedy show. South Park spoofed real trials by having a lawyer ramble about Chewbacca. In the episode, he delivers a long, irrelevant speech to overwhelm jurors. The phrase Chewbacca defense quickly escaped TV and entered legal slang. Lawyers and commentators began using it for real cases with ridiculous arguments. Anytime someone buries a jury under distractions, critics call it Chewbacca style. Ironically, the parody itself was inspired by real-world high-profile defenses. Law professors even reference it when teaching fallacies and trial strategy pitfalls. A cartoon bit accidentally gave courts a perfect nickname for nonsense tactics. Sadi, some other dude did it. Classic alternate suspect defense. Before DNA and smartphones, juries often heard very simple stories of doubt. One classic line is Sadi, short for some other dude did it. Defendants point to mysterious strangers, vague acquaintances, or unnamed third parties. Juries must decide whether that alternate suspect is real or smoke. Modern cases still use Sadi, now tested against cameras and phone records. Sometimes the alternate suspect truly exists, exposing rushed police work and bias. Other times it's little more than a shrug toward reasonable doubt. Either way, Sadi shows how powerful pointing at shadows can be. Not my pants defense blamed cocaine found in borrowed jeans. A traffic stop turned into a drug bust over one tiny pocket. Officers found cocaine tucked inside the back pocket of a man's jeans. The man swore the pants weren't his, he'd borrowed them that morning. In court, his lawyer repeated it like a mantra, "Not my pants." Jurors had to imagine someone loaning out jeans already stuffed with drugs. Prosecutors argued that if you're wearing them, you own what's inside. Sometimes this defense actually succeeds when clothing truly was shared around. Other times, juries roll their eyes and return guilty verdicts quickly. "Not my pants" has become shorthand for desperate, last-ditch courtroom excuses. IKEA Monkey Mom argued her coat-wearing primate was a domesticated child. Shoppers in Toronto stared when a monkey appeared in a shearling coat. The rhesus macaque, later nicknamed Darwin, had escaped a parked car. Authorities seized him and sent him to an Ontario primate sanctuary. His owner sued, arguing she'd raised Darwin like a child at home. She described diapers, bottle feeding, and shopping trips as proof of their bond. The sanctuary countered that wild animals can't legally be treated as children. A Canadian judge ultimately ruled Darwin was property and belonged at sanctuary. The IKEA monkey photos still circulate whenever animal rights and ownership collide. His case shows how people will stretch family language inside a courtroom. Too ugly to harass, defense claimed accuser was not his type. In New York, a woman sued her boss for sexual harassment. She said he groped her and demanded massages during late shifts. The employer fired back with an insult disguised as legal argument. Her side claimed he said she was too ugly to harass. In filings, the defense argued lack of attraction meant no motive. Advocacy groups blasted the tactic as humiliating and irrelevant to consent. The judge let the lawsuit continue, focusing on behavior, not beauty standards. The phrase "too ugly to harass" spread as shorthand for victim blaming. It's a reminder that some defenses attack dignity when facts look bad. In Europe, police arrested a young man for cheering extremists online. He'd posted threats and praise for violent groups on social media. Prosecutors treated the messages as serious support for terrorism recruitment efforts. In court, the defendant tried a very different story about motivation. He claimed he only posed as a radical to impress women online. According to his version, edgy posts were just a twisted dating strategy. Judges were not amused, stressing that threats still terrorize communities regardless. He was convicted, though the "just wanted girls" excuse stuck in headlines. The case shows how online bravado can collide brutally with anti-terror laws. "My dog shot me" defense claimed pet accidentally pulled the trigger. Hunters turning up at emergency rooms sometimes bring unbelievable explanations with them. In one widely reported case, a man arrived with a gunshot wound. He told officers his dog had stepped on the loaded shotgun's trigger. The story spread quickly, complete with photos of the sad-looking dog. Investigators had to consider whether the angle and distance actually matched. Some officials accepted the accident explanation. Others privately suspected human carelessness. The phrase "my dog shot me" became instant internet and courtroom shorthand. Firearms trainers now routinely cite the case when preaching basic safety. Whether accident or excuse, it's a defense that really begs for skepticism. Corporate CEO idiot defense claimed he was clueless about massive fraud. When corporate scandals explode, top executives suddenly remember very little. In several big fraud trials, CEOs insisted they were terrible, uninformed managers. They pointed fingers at accountants, lawyers, and underlings who cooked the books. Defense teams argued spreadsheets and jargon kept bosses from understanding crimes underneath. Prosecutors responded that signing filings and cashing bonuses requires knowing what's happening. Juries sometimes accepted ignorance as mitigation, though rarely as total exoneration. Commentators jokingly labeled this strategy the idiot defense for powerful leaders. It flips expectations, portraying a high-flying executive as helplessly outmatched. The approach raises a harsh question about pay without real oversight. Black rage train shooters planned defense. Blaming racism for rampage. A gunman opened fire on commuters on a Long Island train. 6 people died, and many more were wounded in the attack. The shooter, Colin Ferguson, later chose to represent himself at trial. Early on, his attorneys had considered a black rage psychological defense. Victims' families and commentators criticized using systemic injustice to excuse murder. Ferguson ultimately rejected the strategy, bizarrely cross-examining survivors himself instead. He was convicted on every count and sentenced to life in prison. The black rage idea still appears in discussions of race and responsibility. Some sleep disorders go beyond snoring, and courts have grappled with them. In Canada and elsewhere, men have claimed sexsomnia during assault trials. The condition allegedly causes sexual behavior during deep sleep without awareness. One Toronto case involved a man accused of assaulting a woman nearby. Sleep experts testified his history of strange nighttime behaviors fit the diagnosis. Prosecutors stressed the seriousness of consent and challenged the science behind sexsomnia. In some trials, juries have acquitted, accepting that actions were unconscious. In others, they've convicted, deciding the defendant knew or ignored previous warnings. The defense raises a tough question about responsibility when consciousness disappears. PMS murder defense. Persuaded jury, hormones temporarily hijacked her mind. In a few rare cases, lawyers have blamed homicide on monthly hormones. Women accused of violent outbursts argued severe premenstrual syndrome distorted their thinking. Doctors testified about mood swings, pain, and behavior changes tied to cycles. In one British case, the court reduced a murder charge to manslaughter. The judge accepted that extreme PMS had seriously impaired her self-control temporarily. Critics argued it reinforced stereotypes about women being ruled entirely by biology. Supporters countered that ignoring medical evidence would be just as unfair. Today, judges treat PMS evidence cautiously, usually as context, not full excuse. Still, those early victories showed how new medical labels reshape courtroom narratives. Extreme intoxication. Blackout defense said he was too drunk to plan anything. I was wasted sounds weak, but law sometimes distinguishes drunkenness levels. In some assaults, defendants claim they were in a complete blackout. They admit the acts happened, insist memories vanished and planning was impossible. Defense experts describe blood alcohol levels so high they impair intention and control. Prosecutors counter that choosing to get that drunk already involves risky decisions. Some countries allowed extreme intoxication as a partial shield in serious cases. After public outcry, many tightened laws, so voluntary drunkenness rarely reduces guilt. Courts now usually separate memory gaps from whether someone knew risks beforehand. Still, blackout defenses appear whenever crimes follow nights measured in empty bottles. Grand Theft Auto video game defense blamed cop shooting on gameplay. In Alabama, 3 officers were murdered after a teenager grabbed a gun. The killer, Devin Moore, had spent countless hours playing Grand Theft Auto. His defense argued the game trained him to shoot and steal cars. A separate civil lawsuit even targeted game makers and console companies. Prosecutors insisted millions play violent games without turning real streets into missions. The jury convicted Moore of capital murder despite the media-fueled defense. He received the death penalty, and appeals kept revisiting the gaming angle. The case became central to debates about simulated violence and responsibility. Courts ultimately treated Grand Theft Auto as background, not a legal shield. Religious snake handler claimed venomous worship was protected religious freedom. In parts of Appalachia, Some Pentecostal churches handle rattlesnakes during services. Preachers cite Bible verses about taking up serpents as signs of faith. When authorities charged one handler over illegal venomous snakes, he resisted. In court, he argued the reptiles were part of constitutionally protected worship. Prosecutors answered that public safety laws apply even inside small mountain churches. Some jurors sympathized with tradition. Others focused on bitten congregants and paramedics. In several cases, courts fined or restricted handlers despite religious liberty claims. Tragic deaths from bites sometimes arrived before lawmakers could even intervene. The ongoing clash shows how far belief can push against health regulations. Sovereign citizen defense argued traffic courts had zero authority over him. Videos from around the world show drivers calmly refusing the simplest questions. Some call themselves sovereign citizens and insist laws don't apply to them. In traffic court, one man refused to say guilty or not guilty. He told the judge the courtroom lacked jurisdiction over his living status. Paperwork he filed cited old charters, spelling quirks, and imagined international law. The magistrate patiently explained that traffic rules still governed public roads regardless. After repeated refusals, the court entered pleas for him and continued proceedings. He ended up convicted of ordinary license and registration offenses anyway. Yet the footage keeps circulating in communities, convinced words alone beat tickets. Battered woman syndrome defense recast. Years of abuse behind husband's killing. In many countries, juries long misunderstood why abused women sometimes finally snap. Cases like Francine Hughes and later Kiranjit Ahluwalia changed that conversation. Both endured years of brutal domestic violence before killing their husbands. Psychologists described battered woman syndrome, explaining fear, learned helplessness, and hypervigilance. Instead of one sudden argument, courts heard about long patterns of terror. Appeal courts in places like the UK and Canada accepted this context. Murder convictions were sometimes reduced, or women were acquitted on self-defense grounds. Critics worry over-pathologizing survivors. Supporters say ignoring trauma is worse. Either way, these defenses forced courts to confront hidden violence at home. Medical marijuana card defense challenged federal drug charges with state permission. A driver stopped with cannabis might proudly flash a laminated card. In several U.S. states, doctors can recommend marijuana for certain medical conditions. Defendants have argued that state-issued cards shield them from possession prosecutions. The twist comes when federal law still classifies marijuana alongside hard drugs. In court, lawyers point to confusion between police, state statutes, and Washington. Some juries have leaned sympathetic when patients clearly followed state rules carefully. Other judges remind everyone that federal charges answer to federal schedules. The tug of war has created a patchwork of wins and losses nationwide. It's a vivid example of law disagreeing with itself in one courtroom. I was testing security defense claimed burglary was unpaid penetration testing. Sheriff's deputies in Iowa thought they'd caught classic nighttime courthouse burglars. The two men had laptops, lockpicks, and were inside after hours. At booking, they dropped a surprise. They were professional security testers. Their company had a contract to probe the state's building defenses. Local officials hadn't all gotten the memo and pushed for burglary charges. Headlines asked whether they were ethical hackers or criminals hiding behind paperwork. Eventually, prosecutors dropped most charges after reviewing emails and engagement documents. The testers warned that next time, real criminals wouldn't politely show contracts. Their saga became a go-to story about security tests crossing legal lines. Haunted house defense claimed poltergeists caused property damage, not tenants. Landlords expect noisy neighbors, but not complaints about flying objects and ghosts. In New Jersey, tenants reported doors slamming, dishes shattering, and eerie voices. When the landlord sued over broken items, tenants blamed unseen forces instead. They described the place as haunted and said they were terrified inside. In court, the landlord argued simple negligence, not spirits, wrecked the apartment. The judge focused on leases and evidence, not ghost stories or videos. Similar disputes elsewhere have forced sellers to disclose famous hauntings to buyers. Courts rarely recognize ghosts, but they do recognize upset occupants and stigma. The haunted house defense shows how folklore and contract law sometimes collide.